Hi. Well, there's been some interest in me doing more of these compositional type videos, music theory related or related to composing or improvising or those kinds of things. So I thought I would do one on reharmonization. Now, reharmonization tends to be improvisatory, but it can also be planned out. And most often you hear this when somebody does a cover of a song, they might reharmonize it, or it's kind of a big deal among organists, church organists, and also Jewish pianists. They tend to reharmonize things to give it something different, something new, something you haven't heard before, and to somehow create a certain mood that maybe didn't exist in the original harmonization. Or, jazz musicians do it pretty much all the time. You take a melody and you put different chords under it. So I thought I would do that with a hymn, and this is an original hymn that I'm going to play today. It has some interesting harmonization to it already, but I'll play a simple version of it to begin with, and then I'll play the actual harmonization, and then we can see what else we'll do with it, all right? So I wrote out just the melody, and church hymns are kind of a great thing to do, or any kind of short song like a folk song or something like that, because the melody tends to be very singable and diatonic, which is not necessarily important, but that just means that all of the notes are in the scale of the piece. So this song is in the key of D. It has two sharps, and all of the notes are in that key. There's no accidentals or anything like that. So let me play the melody for you, so you get to hear it. Actually kind of sounds more like a folk song than a hymn, but that's what it is. And here's just a simple harmonization of that melody, sort of based on the actual version. So, that's kind of what we're dealing with. Pretty straightforward. The only chord that I borrowed from the actual arrangement here, which you'll hear, is this that major 2 chord, which is a 5 of 5. For all you music theory buffs out there, 5 of 5. So here's the actual harmonization that's written here. So that actual harmonization features some interesting stuff. Most notably, the end of it goes here, which is actually a flat 7 relative to the key, and it's just in a different place. Now, you You may know or you may not know that there are standard cadences, which are the ends of phrases, right? The first phrase of this piece actually features one of them, which is called a half cadence, right? It ends on the 5 chord, which is the dominant chord, you know. That's the end of it. That's a cadence. That's the end of that phrase. The second phrase does the same thing in this harmonization. And then the other kind of cadence you're going to hear a lot is an authentic cadence. An authentic cadence is that classic 5-1, all right? And there's a perfect authentic cadence and an imperfect one. It doesn't matter right now. But just know that 5-1, pretty much a standard thing, right? All right, that's your standard, your authentic cadence is what that is. And the third kind of cadence you hear a lot is a plagal cadence. Plagal is just 4-1 instead of 5-1. That. The song I always think of with that is Can You Feel the Love Tonight, which has that at the end of it. And then there's also a deceptive cadence. Deceptive cadence goes to a place you weren't expecting, and most often, if you're in a major key, that's the 6, which is a minor chord, right? So that would be the equivalent of going to that B minor chord instead of a D major chord. That's a deceptive cadence. But as you'll see, there are a lot of different ways to make deceptive cadences. One of them is in this piece, which is to go to that flat 7. It's a non-traditional deceptive cadence, but it is deceptive nonetheless, because it takes our ear to somewhere else before it finally resolves to somewhere. Now, if we're going to reharmonize this melody, what are we going to do? You know, I mean, there are a lot of notes here. They're good notes. But one of the things that you want to try to do is find chords that fit with the melody that aren't necessarily here. So that first phrase, now you may want to start with a 1 chord just so we know where we are, right? So now what chord would fit in with the next note? Oh, maybe I go to a flat 7 there, and we get a nice little weird harmonization. And maybe we do end on a half cadence like we did before. Now I'm going to go somewhere really different. So all I'm doing is I'm taking the notes that are in the melody, and I'm finding another chord that goes with them. All right, so there's 2 parts to it. One is, does the melody fit the chord? And 2 is, does the chord lead to the next chord? Now, voice leading has been a subject of study for many, many years. And there are people who will tell you there are rules to this, which there are, and you can follow them, and that's fine. But I think if you follow your ear a bit more, you'll hear what leads and what doesn't, right? So going from this chord to a 1 chord is pretty traditional, right? We're used to hearing that. Going from this chord to a flat 7 chord is different, and those 2 chords lead. They're one right next to the other, right? It's not like I'm just going to play a random chord in the middle. All right, so just be attuned to that as you're going through. So what we have now is nope. Of course, it's not important for you to remember your reharms necessarily unless you're trying to write them down, right? Now, the next section. It's hard to get around that. This is already different. It's a little different. thirds are a good place to go as well. So chords don't necessarily have to just be next to each other, but they can be a third apart. So this chord does relate in some way to this chord. So they do kind of follow each other in a weird sort of way. So don't be afraid to find those either. So here, what I just did here before was it's a 4 chord, just with a weird, mix of things on top of it. And then so what we might think of as a flat 7 to a flat 3, and that flat 3 relates by a third to the 1 because it's a 3 chord, right? Another thing to think about is inversions. You don't always have to play the root of a chord in the bass, right? So you might do that. That's a chord, a 4 chord in second. Oh Jesus! It's a 4 chord in first inversion. I need more coffee. Right. So find inversions. Those are fun to play around with. And then the third thing is you make mistakes. Like you're gonna make some weird choices, and I think instead of saying, "Ooh, that was the wrong chord," lean into it a little bit, right? So I might improvise a little thing. And some of those chords, they don't maybe work. They're not even chords. Maybe they're just clusters that I'm playing. But, those things can do something for you. They can create some drama where you maybe didn't have it before, right? Another thing you could try is just doing something very simple, like it's just these are 3 notes that I'm playing. They're related in fourths. And then I'm going to try to put the melody on top of it. So sometimes that can really take you in a different direction. Way to change keys too if you're interested. You can always go in a weird, wacky direction. I don't know. So the fun thing about reharmonizing too is you can find different things. Maybe you're writing a song where you have a melody that repeats in different sections. You don't always have to copy the harmonization of that section. You can change it up. You can make it different. You can make it minor. Maybe I want to shift this melody into a minor key. So there are all sorts of things you can play with once you open your mind to the fact that you don't have to be stuck with what you started with, right? You can always change it up. You can always make it new, and that's kind of the fun of it, And I think that's why a lot of church musicians, especially and religious musicians, they tend to do these reharmonizations because how many times can you play the same hymn the same way or the same song the same way? And especially some of them have very traditional sounding chord changes and stuff. You can really change it up somehow to create interest for yourself, but also hopefully for the people you're playing for. So, anyway, those are just a few brief tips on how to reharmonize. And I don't think you need an extensive knowledge of music theory to do this. I think you can, if you have some piano or some guitar or something, just play around with some chords, throw different things in there, and experiment. And feel free to make mistakes, because that's how you learn, you know? So, thanks for watching.